Yep. I think everybody's in. Welcome, everyone, and I call the meeting to order. It is 1:02. Any conflicts of interest declarations? Seeing none. Questions and information arising out of the minutes and not otherwise on the agenda? Seeing none. I just want to go back for a second. I just want to welcome Tom Gervais from the ministry. Thank you for attending today, and we missed you for the last time. Sorry about that. And we also have the media. Welcome back, media. And we also have a member from the community, Dax Durazio. Welcome. Okay, adoption of minutes. Moved by? Seconded by?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Motion to accept the agenda for May 27th. Mover?
I can
move,
move,
Chair.
John.
Ian? Lisa? Resolved that
Thank
the
you.
agenda of the regular meeting as presented be hereby approved. All in favor? Okay, Chief, your communication and reports, starting with 7A.
Okay, 7A, yeah, let's wait for Lincoln to pull it up. So we have a pile of stats there for this, as we suspended the last meeting due to COVID. So we have the year-to-year analysis between 19 and 20 that I'll do, and we have then the month-to-month that we'll usually do, but we have 2 months of that. So we're going to start off with our overtime stuff that's in front of you right now. And as you can see, overtime for the month of April went from 61,000 in 20 to 80,000 or 79.8. And we can tell you right off the bat, April was an incredibly busy month. We had the protests at Bellevue Park, which you read about in the press, with increasing number of FTEs to manage the crowds and enforce the law. We also had that month 3 arsons, 3 kidnappings, 10 weapon calls with 4 charges, 4 of those occurrences with charges laid. So, I mean, actually, going up 10% or 9% isn't that bad considering the amount of workload that we had that time period. If you flip to the next slide, you can see the graphical demonstration of that, where you can see, the blue line that stops at April and the different months and years there. So, we are a little higher than 20, but we're not as high as the times in 18 and 19, which are your green and purple, my eyes are right, 2 top lines. So we're still below those overtime costs, even with the increased workload. Next slide is your monthly staff shortage time costs, and you can see from March to April, the blue line went pretty well in patrol, went straight up, and that again is with 15,000. We're calling people in, honestly, to backfill frontline response, because each of those occurrences are a total hands-on deck approach. And we're fortunate in our serve costs. They did go up some, but not as much, obviously, as the uniform. So that is our overtime costs, and we're going to move into our stats. If there's any questions about the overtime before I move forward. Hearing none. Okay, so again, the first group here is the first group of stats is going to be probably the most valuable in terms of the statistical analysis, because it gives you high numbers, high sample sizes, or their total population size. So it's a good way to look at how much has 19 to 20 truly changed. And I'll start you off at the top there. If we see on crimes of violence, we're up approximately 8.5% in terms of crimes of violence. But the biggest chunks in there are obviously offensive weapons that went from 39 to 65, a 67% increase. In robberies, which is related to offensive weapons, we went from 48 to 81, which is a 70% increase. And you're going to see later in our conversations, both in open and closed, that the weapon recall and the robbery issues are significant in the violent calls that we're experiencing this year. If we look at crimes of property, we see rather interesting figures here. We only went up in total break and enters 5%. From 843 to 885, which really isn't that significant when you look at, is it due to chance or is it something different happening? Business B&Es went up from 154 to 195 by 27%.
Chair Bruno, could I just ask a question?
Sure.
Chief, with the attempt break and enters up 33.9, is there any way to determine which was business or residence, or is it just bulked together as attempted break and enters?
That's a good question, Lisa. I would have to get back to you. I want to say that it was still, if there was a further analysis, it would be broken down into business or residential.
Okay.
Not quite sure if those two are represented by business and residence above.
Okay.
But that's a good question, and I can get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because that would be good moving forward if we want to put out a PSA if there has been heightened attempts at either a business or a neighborhood or a residence, just for folks to know kind of how to keep watch and that sort of thing. That would be really helpful. Thanks.
If we look a little further down, we see frauds are up from 504 to 658 at 31%. But the good news, really, if you call it good, is that the total crimes of property between the 2 years have relatively stayed the same at 2.9%, shows a negative at 2.9, but really that's pretty consistent that it's the standard property offenses numbers are consistent between 19 and 20. We go to the next slide, which is where we're looking at the YOA stuff. Now, my reservation here on this data is the numbers are small, but and so there's sample size issues here, but still, you know, you see, just figuratively speaking, assaults went from 78 in 19 to 73, relatively consistent. The total crimes of violence is 2.3% across all YOs. That's showing you that you have a relatively consistent victimization level at the YO level. Crimes of property, there was no data on, but if we follow theft of vehicle, theft from vehicle, and shoplifting, they're all significantly down at 13.5%. So that's a bit of an insight into the YOA situation. Now, next slide, if we go to, we're going to do the monthly February to February comparator. And I'll keep it at a high level because we're going to do this plus the 2 month, and then March, the month, and then the 3 month cumulative. But we see, again, calls for service are down 15% between February of 20 and February of 21. Robberies, however, which is consistent with other indicators, went from 9 to 11 up. Sex assaults have went down 67%, which is good. Again, when we look at crimes of property, we see that the 47% decrease in February to February crimes of property. Biggest was business from 27 to 5. Residences from 47 to 25. When we go a little further down, shoplifting was up from 19 to 32. And theft of motor vehicle was down 28%. If we look at the cumulative value from January and February of the 2 years, we see similar findings, obviously. There we go. So the February cumulative, we find that total calls for service, January and February combined, is down 7.1%. Crimes of violence are also down 12%. Sex assaults are down, which is great, from 18 to 8. Break and enters again are down 44%, 174 to 97. We see theft are down as well, 10.3%. Frauds are down by 30%. If we look at the cumulative of, we go to March's numbers. Just keep going down to March. A lot of stats here. Okay, the March to March, we see again, the calls for service are up about 17% from 2261 to 2644. We see assaults are up, warmer weather, 39 to 48. Crimes of property are relatively consistent for March, only varying by 3%. Businesses are down 60%, businesses are up 23%. Shoplifting and theft from motor vehicles, theft from motor vehicles is down 47%, frauds are down 27%. And again, if we look at the cumulative approach for January through March, year to year, again, the total calls for service are staying consistent between the 2 years at a 5% variance. Sex assaults are down 50%. Robberies again stay up or consistent from 25 to 27. Crimes of property are down 33% when we look at, again, the 3-month cumulative. Businesses at 69, 30 at residences. When we look at theft overall, it's down 17%. Theft from vehicles is down 46%. So those are the statistics for the 3 months. The last one there, I want to show you the prints cumulative. We find that in March of 21, we are at 21 occurrences to date and 7 occurrences in the month of March for Prince Township. That is the statistics for the year to date and February month to month and February and March cumulative.
Any questions, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, certainly spent quite a bit of time myself looking through the stats for the first quarter of the year. I appreciate them. Thank you for providing them and your team for putting them together. And I was looking for conclusions and trends and trying to draw some conclusions this year compared to last. It's clear in the data that you don't have really an increased call for services, and that's where some crime is down and some crime is up. One of the conclusions that I drew is that, and you're seeing this, I think, in the media the service is putting out, is that acute or serious crimes appear to me to be increasing. So, I spent quite a bit of time looking at the material, but I would frankly just like your perspective on what you see in this data and the basis for the trends you're seeing. So your opinion on what's driving it.
Well, it's an excellent question, and I'll just cut to the chase. Occurrences in general remain constant, simply due to fluctuations in weather and mobility, etc. But the big thing we're showing you is that when you have, in 1 month, you have in April 3 arsons, 3 kidnappings, 10 weapon calls. When it comes to FEE disbursement, you're talking about overtime through the roof. You have to maintain these crime scenes for 48 to 72 hours, constant officers on it, forensic ident, CID, everybody's called in overtime. No one goes home for 2 days. These are the issues, sir, that it tends to spike. So to your point, if you say to me, well, Chief, you had 3, 6, 16 occurrences, those 16 occurrences, which you're not going to see represented on data because their sample sizes are too small. When it comes to overtime and you see what they cost, that's the issue. And that is the issue that draws attention of the community in terms of, safety and fear and whatnot.
So Chief, I wasn't really driving at the overtime costs. I'm not concerned about that from the perspective that, you've got to deploy the service to meet the needs that are rising in the community. What I was more looking for is your perspective on because I don't recall a month like April. Not only in the 6 years that I've been mayor, I don't recall a month like April. I simply don't recall a month like April. So I was hoping to get your perspective on what you see in the data, independent of costs.
Well,
What you see in the data and what you see maybe as, in your opinion, what's some of the driving kind of forces behind the escalation of the acute or more serious crime?
so the reason I brought up the overtime is they do identify what those significant occurrences are. And that is what contributes to the spike. But that spike isn't seen statistically because the sample sizes are slow.
Yeah.
Good point, sir. The reason and cause for those arsons, those weapon occurrences is purely due to the drug industry that we have in this city.
Okay.
First and foremost, I can tell you that I don't think one of these that we've ever investigated had no ties to the criminal subculture, no ties to the opioid usage in the city. And there's three solutions to it that I've been very clear in the past is we need a treatment facility, and I know you and council and this board have heard it many times, but unless these people get treated and they have long-term care for them, the cycle of violence will continue, but it will continue exponentially, where this has to be stopped. We know that opioid addiction is a public health issue, and the police will do everything in our power to prevent. But these calls for service, you mentioned, sir, and quite eloquently in your history in this city, and as mayor, you've never seen this before. Neither have the 200 employees in this police service have ever seen the amount of gun violence in this city related to the drug subtrade. You saw our arrests are there. People are being arrested. They're put before the courts. Our clearance ratio in terms of serious and violent crime is, I'm sure, close to 100%. They are put before the courts. The difficulty is it's a public health issue, not a public safety issue. It needs to be addressed so that the core causes of this issue can be mitigated. Bill C-75 has not helped us, and I know you've heard me say it before, but on recognizance in the last 35 years of Bob and I's career, if you were on your second or third recon, you were kept in. You were not given the ability to continue your violent crime episodes. That's over. People do not go to jail unless they're arrested for the substantive offenses, and they're usually released. And they're on 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 recalls. You've quoted me before on 33 releases on one individual that was originally a robbery call. So, you know, we're all pretty concerned, but different levels of government have to jump in and deal with this crisis. And this isn't just a Sault Ste. Marie issue. This is across Northern Ontario. My colleagues in the OACP and the board of directors will confirm it. It's something that has to be taken on as a collective multivariate approach to long-term drug addiction. That's my.
No, it's just me, Chief, and members of the board, but I'm reading more and more and more when I read the reports, the crime reports in town of individuals who are committing crimes while on probation. So I think you're right when you're saying, hey, you know, that there's I don't know if it's an attitude out there with those involved in crimes that, hey, this is it's just an arrest and release. You're not going to jail, you know, and that's why we're seeing more and more individuals that are committing second crimes and third crimes while they're on probation. It must be very, very frustrating, not only for the police services, but for the public at large. That's the most common line that I've heard over the past 3, 4, 5 months is, well, they're out on probation or they're out in bail and they're committing more crimes. And I'm left with just saying, well, I think the justice system is broken. Do I have all the answers for it? Unfortunately, I don't. Or if I do, I have to keep them to myself. Just an observation.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just finish, Chief, I appreciate your answer very much. I suspected looking at the occurrences that they were directly related to the criminal subculture that deals with the trafficking of opioids and narcotics. What I do want to acknowledge is two things. One is I think it's important that the community knows that the police service is responding to that, and that the police service is out there addressing this, dealing with it, making the arrests. I think that's critical, that the community knows from a community safety perspective that Sault Ste. Marie Police Services is present and it's dealing with this. I think you can see that in the overtime, and I don't question the overtime at all in that respect. The second thing I want to acknowledge relates to that. April would have been a very stressful month for the service and for our officers. And working overtime in and of itself is taxing, I'm sure. So I want to acknowledge the work of the police service in responding to these incidents. I know that we will keep on responding to them and keep on making the arrests when we see the criminal wrongdoing. But I share your perspective entirely, Chief, that what we really need to do as a community, as a province, as a country, is deal with the demand issue, so that people that need care get care, and there isn't such a significant demand for the system that's in place to supply people with the drugs they need to satisfy their their health issues and their addiction challenges. So two things. One, I want to recognize the tough month that April was. I think there was some reassuring things in the trend, but certainly the data did demonstrate that we had some very acute and serious crimes, and I want the community to know that the police service is responding to those crimes and will continue to respond to those crimes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions or comments? Chief?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Mayor for those comments. They're much appreciated. And will be passed on to our membership. Thank you. So for Good Lincoln, we'll go to provincial offense statistics. So under a Highway Traffic Act, permits and license, we're down from 21 to 9 from March to April. We did go up in seatbelt infractions from 1 to 8. We doubled our signal lights for traffic signs from 6 to 12, and we doubled our speeding from 29 to 42 in terms of laying charges under the Highway Traffic Act. We go to public complaints. Just an overview here. So we have 2 months to do. We'll first start off with April and May. So in April, we had 4 new complaints. 1 of them is ongoing, and 3 of them are not being proceeded with OIRPD and are considered closed. We had 12 last year during the month of April and 12 this year. So it's relatively consistent between the 2 years. If you look at the month of May, we've had 3 new complaints come in. 1, the director of OIRPD is not proceeding. 1 is ongoing that we're looking into, and the 3rd is closed as a result of OIRPD. And we went up 1 this year, 14 last, 15 this year. That's our summary of that. In terms of our use of force, you can see in our firearms pointed, we see February low at 3, March was a busy month with 12, April down to 3. When we look at our less lethal use of force, we see March again was up at 11, where the conducted energy weapon was displayed, and 3 in April. That's it for us, and we're on to travel log. Travel log is pretty slim. You'll see the child exploitation course that we sent one of our officers on, as well as the bond course in Canadian Police College at the bottom. That's the biggest ticket item there. Obviously, it's a very expensive course, but very required. And the middle 3 are simply the OPC costs for the new recruits. We go to notice of appreciation. We have 4 during the month of May. And the first is a gentleman from DC, wanted to thank our officers. It was a well-being check on a 65-year-old sister here. And he found that both the dispatcher and the officers were compassionate, caring, and articulated the situation very well. The second one is a complimentary email from a business owner. Wanted to thank 2 of our officers for their empathy and understanding. The third is a phone call and wanting to thank our officers in relation to a call that we dealt with their father. Again, he noticed the compassion and professionalism. And the fourth is a phone call for thanking us for our assistance with an elderly neighbor. Again, helpful, reassuring, and that was both the dispatcher and the officers that attended. The next item is, sorry?
No question.
Next item is the Sioux College bursaries. This comes up every year, as we know. They've asked for, do we need with Rick on?
Right,
Sioux
I was
College.
just checking to see if Rick is on. Rick, are you in? Okay, seeing he's not on right now. Otherwise, he would probably have to declare a conflict.
Sorry,
Oh,
sorry, John, I was on mute. I'm sorry. Yeah,
no.
but I do have a conflict, yes.
Okay, so that's been declared, so if you could just refrain from this part of the program. And Chief,
I'm happy to move this, John.
Okay,
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, we do this every year, so I'm happy to move this.
So, Mr. Mayor, moved it, seconder.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Resolved that the board an annual contribution to the scholarship bursary and award program of Sioux College in the amount of $1,500 to be funded from the board option account. All in favor? Rick, you can come back on.
Thanks, John.
Okay. The next item is the taxi bylaw. Chief,
I think.
Lisa is going to speak to this. Lisa?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. I also sit on the accessibility committee, and at our last meeting, it was brought to the attention of our committee that the taxi service in terms of ambulatory and wheelchair accessible has not been easily or readily available during the 24-hour period that is required. So if you take a look at under our bylaw, item 8.18, for companies that have 35 or less cars, one accessible vehicle must be available 24 hours in a day, and 35 or more vehicles, 2 wheelchair accessible vehicles have to be available 24 hours a day. From reports that Nancy Scott, our accessibility coordinator, has been receiving is that one company does not have anything available after 4 p.m. and that the other company stops service at midnight. So to make a better reporting for the committee in terms of adhering to the bylaw, the recommendation is that to invite either the deputy chief or the chief to our next accessibility committee meeting, which is June the 9th. And that way it'll give Nancy a time to survey those that use the service, and then we can make a report from there. So it has been brought to the attention based on people in not just that are on the committee, but people that have messaged Nancy in the greater community that require this service, and it hasn't been available. So we just want to, make that known, that there is an issue with adherence to the bylaw, and move forward to invite one of you to the next meeting so that we can formulate a more solid report in terms of non-compliance, and then move forward from there.
Chief, Deputy, if you have-
Yeah, we're more than happy to participate. I guess the reason one slight reservation is we have on the next agenda item was taxi bylaw under the municipality, and it was to move all taxi stuff back to the municipality and away from policing.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, we're not trained in accessibility. We're trained in enforcement of the law. There's lots of bylaws. We have a variety of different ways of doing that in the city. And we will certainly attend because it is the law of the day. But going
Correct.
forward, our suggestion in the next item number 10 is that there was a comment, I believe, at a board meeting in January or last year that someone would move this agenda back to the city to move it away from policing and put it back into the enforcement of regular bylaw that the city manages. So my answer is absolutely yes, we can be there, with the caveat that we make attempts to follow through in our last conversations of moving this back to the city. Those are my comments.
Any questions or comments to the chief?
Yeah, John, Mr. Chair, when I saw this agenda item, there was no report attached to it. There was no material provided, so I didn't know what either item was about. But I gave I asked the CEO kind of what the state of the conversation between police services and the city was on the taxi bylaw. As a result of the comments the chief's referring to, we did start a discussion with administration here to talk to the police services about the taxi bylaw, and that's ongoing as I understand it. I think that there's a team at the city that's been dealing with is it Constable Magnan? Is that correct, Mr. Chief?
Sergeant Raymond.
Oh, Sergeant Magnan. And so their conversations are ongoing, and I don't really know where they're at, but I didn't appreciate that there was going to be a move today to send this back to the city. I'm not entirely sure that we could do that unilaterally. So my suggestion would be that we defer the item of moving it back to the city one meeting, so that the city can get a handle on that and have further discussions with the police services about that, because it certainly wasn't the CAO's impression that was where the discussions were at. So I think maybe we can sort that out between now and our next meeting and have some finality to this at our next meeting.
That's
agreeable to the rest of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I totally agree with that as well.
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm having a hard time really hearing anybody else. Although the audio level is really low, although I've turned it up as much as I can here. John, I didn't hear what you said there, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no, I agree with you 100%, and we will, I think the suggestion is fair that we move it to the next meeting, and I think the intention, was to kind of discuss it and move it forward to the next meeting. So we apologize for not having some attachments there. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board members?
no, I'll just, I'll have Nancy Scott, Chief, send the calendar invite to Lisa, and then the two of you can determine who should attend.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and we've seen no other questions or comments. Our next meeting is June 24th, 2021. And just before we adjourn, if there are any questions, our community members, usually if you have anything, you could present it now. Tom, do you have any questions or comments?
None for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing none, thank you all for attending. As usual, media, you will have access to our chief and deputy through Lincoln. as usual. And if there's any other situations, please check with the corporate communication person, Lincoln Louder. So thank you, and we will take a minute break and then we'll get into caucus. Oh, and move, yes, sorry, adjournment time, it is 1:37. Move by
I'll move it, John.
Rick, seconded
Yeah.
Ian, thank you. But the regular meeting is adjourned and the board enter the caucus meeting. Thank you.